Melissa Russo will be moderating this first discussion session and introduce you to our presenters. And you will join her in the conversation. So without further ado, here we go.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We have with us Deputy Mayor Richard Buery, who's the Deputy Mayor for Strategic Policy Initiatives in the Mayor's office. And he's been really responsible for putting PreK together, for overseeing this groundbreaking and historic effort in New York City. And we're also joined by Sheena Wright, who's the President and CEO of the United Way of New York City. And we've already had an interesting conversation, which has piqued my interest in the early childhood work she's doing. So let's get started. Deputy Mayor, we know that pre-kindergarten is designed to teach four-year-olds, and we have more than 50,000 four-year-olds now enrolled in New York City. Children literally starting school a year earlier. People said it would never happen. There were a lot of naysayers, as Mayor de Blasio likes to point out. Given that these children are so young, tell us what role you see literacy playing in pre-K, and conversely, what role you see pre-K playing in literacy.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Sheena. And thank you all for having me here. And thanks, Scholastic. I love this auditorium. This is a great space. So thank you all for having me. So pre-kindergarten, you know, as you said, Melissa, we really are so proud here in New York. We have made a historic commitment to expanding access to pre-kindergarten for four-year-olds. Last year, there were about 20,000 children enrolled in full-day pre-kindergarten, and as of today, there are over 50,000 children enrolled in full-day pre-kindergarten, with the goal of reaching full capacity for every four-year-old next year. And it's hard to sort of overestimate the critical importance of adding an additional year to schooling. You know, pre-kindergarten serves as a building block for a number of reasons, and I think we all understand the really incontrovertible evidence that shows the impact that high-quality pre-kindergarten has, both in the early years but over the long term. For us, we really think that the opportunity to have every four-year-old in pre-kindergarten did a couple of basic things. One, by making sure that every four-year-old is prepared for kindergarten, we make the job of the educational system easier. I mean, I think the biggest cheerleaders for this work are not just parents, but kindergarten teachers around the city, who understand that they will have four-year-olds who are more likely to be socially prepared for the classroom, more likely to be academically prepared for the classroom. And particularly because we know literacy is so critical and early literacy is so critical. We know, we've all heard about the word gap for low-income children and wealthier children and how that impacts long-term learning. The New York Times ran an interesting article recently describing that it's not just a gap in the quantity of words, but the quality of words, the depth of language that young people experience. So we know that pre-kindergarten also offers a tremendous opportunity to expose children to language in an effective manner, and also to help support parents as they think about their role in introducing children to language. Pre-kindergarten is just one of the things that we as a city are committed to working on to improve early childhood literacy and early access to literacy. There's a lot of other exciting things that we're working on, but we think pre-kindergarten is going to be critical to giving young four-year-olds a platform for learning, which is going to have a vast impact on the school system overall.
So tell us more about the curriculum in pre-K. I'm guessing that you're seeing a wide range of ability coming in at age 4, that perhaps in some of the more well-off neighborhoods of the city, you're seeing children who are coming in, they already know their numbers, they already know their letters, maybe some of them are already reading. And in other areas, you're probably seeing something different. What do you expect children to know? What do you hope they will know by the time they enter pre-K? And what do you hope that as a baseline they will know coming out?
That's a great question. And of course, you know, children come into pre-K classrooms with different levels of experience and different exposures to schooling. As you have 3-year-olds who are already engaged in formal education, 3-year-olds who are coming from environments with libraries, with a richer literacy environment, and just as would be the case for children entering kindergarten. So, you know, New York State is one of 2 states that has adopted the pre-K foundations for the Common Core. Common Core has lots of different connotations depending on who you speak to, but it's important to remember that what the Common Core is fundamentally is a set of standards for what children should learn. And by adopting the pre-K foundations for the Common Core, what we're accepting is that there are a set of standards that you want 4-year-olds to have to be kindergarten ready by the time they start school. A great, and I know there are a lot of educators in the room, so I don't have to tell this to anyone here, but the curriculum in the pre-kindergarten classroom should not be about primarily a teacher standing in front of a room giving instruction to children. It is fundamentally and primarily about young people exploring the world through play, through engagement, through authentic language development. A great pre-kindergarten classroom is one where children spend part of the day playing dress up, sitting in a circle, reading books, manipulating things with their hands, exploring. And through this process, they are learning not only vocabulary, not only are they hearing words, but they're learning how to learn. They're learning how to participate with a group of kids in the classroom. They're developing socially. They're developing emotionally. And so what you'll see around the city is you'll see lots of different approaches. We very intentionally did not identify one curriculum or two curriculum that every center had to use. Instead, we've established standards for what the curricula should look like. And we've established a strong capacity through our team of coaches who are experienced early childhood educators whose job it is to go out into the field and work with schools and pre-kindergartens around the city. But at the heart of what you should be seeing in these rooms, you should be seeing joyous, fun environments where kids are playing, they're engaging, and where they're surrounded by language and surrounded by opportunities to name things, to talk about things, and to learn from one another.
Should they be surrounded by the alphabet? This is a conversation I've had with my daughter's teachers. My daughter's in a private nursery school program. She's 3.5. And I'm always asking, I don't see a ton of letters around the room. And they always say, no, it's really about play. It's about, sort of the opposite of what we worry about. Some children aren't getting enough exposure to language, words, and some of us are neurotic that we think that our children should be getting more exposure to it. But are letters, numbers, is there a specific expectation that children will be familiar with this by the time they leave?
I have a deep familiarity with the neuroses of being a parent. So I think it's very important that parents find the program and the approach that makes sense for that parent. I think it would be impossible to answer that question in a way that made sense for everyone. I would say that the point of pre-kindergarten is not in sort of a binary way to teach children how to read. I mean, it's not the point of pre-kindergarten. The point of pre-kindergarten is to have 4-year-olds who are ready to learn how to read when they begin to learn how to read when they enter the kindergarten environment. And so I think much more important, generally, than a 4-year-old knowing their letters and their numbers, is a 4-year-old who has a rich exposure to language and who loves being in the classroom. Because part of what you want to establish at that age group is a child who wants to come to school. Now that being said, I think 4-year-olds are different, parents are different, and part of the way we've designed this system is that you don't have an assigned pre-kindergarten as a parent. You have the opportunity to find the program that's right for you, and different programs will have different approaches. But I don't think your teacher is wrong. I think it's really a question about what's right for you. But don't worry, they don't have to learn they don't have to learn how to add yet. Right. Algebra will come later.
If I can just add to that, Melissa, I think one of the key points that Rich mentioned is that we want our kids to like school, to love school, to be excited about school. So that pre-kindergarten experience is really important. But I would also add that I think different communities have different needs. Rich mentioned there's some communities where there's the word gap. 61% of low-income children do not have books at home. And that statistic is always, people think, oh, what's wrong with those parents? But if you're making choices between rent and food, books are not on the list. So there are some communities that do need more literacy-rich environments. They're already behind in many ways. So the structure and the resources that those communities need may be greater because your daughter has books at home. You're teaching her the alphabet, I already know, and numbers and addition and everything at home. And so you have these other suite of resources and services that other communities don't have, and it's really, it's about poverty. It's not that parents don't want their kids to have every single thing possible. So we have to diagnose, I think, what's needed across the city and make sure those resources and services are available.
Can you tell us some of what the United Way is doing to try to combat some of these issues?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have done, certainly in partnership with the city, is we have launched the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which is a national campaign. I think everyone in here is very familiar with it. It started in 2010 with the goal of doubling the number of third graders reading on grade level in the country by 2020. We know that that is the biggest predictor of whether or not you will graduate from high school, and we know what happens when you don't graduate from high school. We've decided to focus our efforts in 10 of the toughest neighborhoods of the city. School readiness is foundational. We can't get there unless we have improved our school readiness systems across certainly these communities. So universal pre-K, high quality Head Start programs and other early childhood programs, home-based care, really making sure that young people, and particularly some of the toughest neighborhoods, have the tools and skills, and parents and families that they need to prepare their kids for school is critically important in reaching that goal.
Deputy Mayor, is this something you mentioned that it's not just pre-K, there are other things you're looking at. Are you looking at, as a city, at what can be done to educate parents on the importance of what needs to happen in ages 0 through 3?
We absolutely are. You know, one of the initiatives that I'm so proud to be a part of is something called the New York City Children's Cabinet, which is a new effort to coordinate the work of 23 different city agencies that touch the lives of children. Obvious agencies like the Department of Education and the Administration for Children's Services, but also perhaps less obvious agencies like the Police Department and the Parks Department. And so part of what we're doing as a city is trying to understand how these agencies can work together to empower families. And so one of the things we're going to talk more about over the coming months is a real effort to teach parents around New York City about the importance of early literacy and the importance of talking to children and singing to children. And so one of the things we're going to be doing is figuring out how we can capture the energy and expertise of all these agencies to communicate to the parents of New York City about why it's so important to engage in talking to your babies, and how every opportunity, every moment is an opportunity to do so. Whether you're waiting for the bus or at the laundromat or at the barber shop or at the supermarket, there's always an opportunity to point out what they can is what you're putting in the cart, to talk about colors and shapes. And so we're really excited to have the opportunity to think about how we can engage in a dialogue with the parents of the city about the importance of exposing children to language. You know, we know that 80% of a child's brain is developed by age 3, which means that as important as our work in pre-kindergarten is, there are many ways in which pre-kindergarten is late to begin the process of thinking about literacy. And so we're really going to think as a city about how we can partner with parents who we know are the first and best teachers of children. To, as Sheena said, it's not because of lack of love or lack of intention, but often lack of information and resources. And so we want to make sure parents have the information and the resources to help get children ready, so that even those pre-kindergarten teachers have an easier time when the children come to the classroom.
Right. You mentioned that kindergarten teachers will be among those who are happy about pre-K. I would imagine it's also first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade teachers, education officials down the road who might be able to brag, for lack of a better word, about better test scores. How will you measure the success of pre-kindergarten? Is it waiting a few years and looking to see if our students in a few years are doing better in school, are reading at grade level, or is there any more immediate way to measure the success of pre-K in these first couple of years?
Well, look, ultimately, you're absolutely right. You know, part of the investment that we're making in pre-kindergarten is really about a long-term investment where some future mayor can take credit, hopefully, for increased high school graduation rates.
So not within the 4 or 8 years that Mayor de Blasio
No. It's not the kind of investment you make when you're looking to take credit for those high school graduation rates down the road. That being said, we're making a massive investment in children, and we have a responsibility of communicating to the public why that was a good investment, but also making sure that the investment is being that the money is being spent in a useful way. So we are beginning what is going to be a comprehensive 2-year evaluation with an organization called Westat and Metis Associates to evaluate the program. We're going to be looking to evaluate, first of all, the process of the program, so looking at how we implemented this program to see how we can do better, but also just so other cities around the country that want to make similar investments in pre-kindergarten can learn as well, but also looking at the impacts that pre-kindergarten are making now in terms of kindergarten readiness. And so we're going to be doing some short-term evaluations as well, but short-term evaluation that hopefully put us in good stead to do the long-term evaluation, which is really what we're ultimately trying to get at.
And if I can also just add to that, I think what this administration is doing is really looking at that kind of long-term and appreciating that just making an investment in pre-K is not the panacea. You know, we've got to continue to have resources available throughout that continuum. So after school, you know, extended day programs for middle school is another big hallmark of this administration. Community learning schools where you're infusing services from, you know, kindergarten through 12th grade in school. And I think, you know, we do a lot of work with the business community and the corporate sector. And there has been this critique of, you know, we're investing all this money in 4-year-olds. How can you prove that this is going to lead to increased graduation rates? And I think that's just the wrong question. I think if you look at any kind of investment in business, you look at how it's going to kind of interact with other things. There's not a one-shot bullet kind of solution to this. And I mean, it's also common sense. If you invest in pre-K, but then they go into elementary schools that don't have what they need, don't have enough learning time, don't have the resources, you're going to see some drops. And if that continues, you're going to have some challenges down the road. So it's part of a system and a continuum, and that investment has to be sustained over the long run.
So then what can you do to help raise awareness as you're trying to get the business community to invest? How do you make that case?
Well, I think certainly the research that'll be done will be helpful and important. Making the business case, a lot of things that we talk about when we talk to our business leaders is that, you know, school readiness is a key lever in reading on grade level by 3rd grade, and all the studies show that if you don't do that, as I said, and with the cost to society, there's lots of data about the additional costs for high school dropouts. I think there was a study just released that said the cost of an inmate now is close to $100,000 a year. The comptroller's office released that report. 68% of inmates are high school dropouts. So, I mean, they understand that and understand those numbers, and also, very importantly, the lost opportunity. If we close the racial achievement gap in this country, our GDP will increase by, you know, $600 billion just in one fell swoop. And they appreciate, I think, by and large, you know, that we need the workforce of tomorrow. By 2025, 60% of all jobs are going to require some sort of college education or advanced degree. So they get it, but it's just kind of walking them through. We need a series of investments to get us there.
Can you give us some examples?
I'm sorry, can I just follow up? I just want to clarify one thing also. There really isn't an open question about whether quality pre-kindergarten pays for itself over and over again over the long term. An investment in pre-K is worth $7 in returns as measured by increased educational outcomes. And
$1 costs. Investment brings $7.
Yeah, so there really isn't a question about that. When I talk about our evaluation, it's not to prove the quality of pre-K, it's just to understand how we're doing in our implementation. And so I think anyone who wants to know that this is a good investment, that research case is closed.
So, give us some examples of how private
Thank you for the applause. That's right.
Give us some areas give us an example of where private investment would be useful. And I'm just wondering if that's something that the city's hoping to elicit.
Oh, private investment. I mean, the corporate sector has to be a part of the solution to the challenges in our educational system, absolutely. And so we've been able to work with our corporate partners. Certainly the city has the Mayor's Fund, which is really focused on fundraising to leverage the government resources and multiply the effort and impact. And many companies have their own particular initiatives or strategies as well that they want to combine with what's happening, what government is doing. And that's basically our job. I mean, we bring the corporate sector, the nonprofit sector, and kind of government together to really knit together the pieces in the most effective way. And you know, as Rich said, the case is closed, and there have been corporate executive CEOs that, you know, capitalists for preschools. Like, there's some people who get it, but there are a lot of people who don't as well. And so we have to continue to make the case, and we have to continue to make a strong case that this is important, and we need those corporate dollars in order to make it all work.
It's interesting, we were talking about the Children's Cabinet a little while ago, and I found it fascinating when I interviewed the ACS Commissioner, Gladys Carrion, a couple of months ago, and of course the primary mission of the Administration for Children's Services is keeping children safe, protecting them from abuse and neglect, investigating complaints, foster care. And I was so interested when she said that one of the newer priorities would be not only to make sure that the child was safe at home, but to make sure that the child is doing well in school. And I said, really? Is that really what the ACS role should be? You know, and she basically explained that this administration is taking a much more holistic approach. So I'm interested if you can give us an example of something that you're working on in the Children's Cabinet now that would show us, you know, the multi-agency investment in early childhood education.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we have to get past child safety to child well-being. So keeping children safe is a floor, it's an expectation. But a safe child who can't read, a safe child who can't grow up to get a job, a safe child who doesn't have access to a quality education is not a child who's living the life they deserve. And we as a city and as a nation lose when that child is not able to reach their full potential. So, you know, often in city government, a friend of mine once said, and I always thought it was a great way of describing it, that cities and governments are organized vertically, but children live horizontally. And so an organization like ACS, which has a mission around child safety, that's great, that's important. But too often you have an environment where a child is in a difficult environment in foster care. You make a big investment in that child, and once the safety issue is resolved, the deep investments go away. But you still have a child living in poverty and who is at fundamental threat. So we have to find a way to get agencies to work together. And so this happens in a number of ways. Part of it is around information sharing. And so part of what we're trying to do as a city is to share data so that we can make better decisions. And this implies child well-being, but it also implies basic child safety concerns as well. The Children's Cabinet came out fundamentally after the murder of Miles Dobson, a 4-year-old who was killed by his dad's girlfriend. And part of the challenge is that although the child was known to ACS, ACS didn't know that the father was under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections. And so communication between the Department of Corrections and the Administration for Children's Services may have made a difference for this child.
So the father was essentially in jail, and nobody knew that, so he had left the child in the care of someone else that had not been signed off on, and that's how this happened.
And every time the caseworker would come to the home, they would say, oh, Dad's at work. And the ACS workers didn't have any reason to know differently. So part of what we're trying to map out are the different ways where information held by one agency could be shared with other agencies so that people on the ground can make better decisions. So that's the one big area that we're trying to capture, and also to share that information proactively. We're also looking at areas where policies by one agency undermine the interests of another. So as an example, you know, if you're a family to enter the shelter system, you have to go to an intake center in the Bronx.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
So Gladys tells this story often, and she tells it more powerfully than I do, but I'll just say it briefly. So there was a family that was living in substandard housing, dad and mom, and I think 3 kids, and ACS workers came and said, unless you find another place to live, we're going to put your kids in foster care because they're not safe here. And so that meant going to find shelter. The problem was the dad had a job, and it was Regents Week, and the oldest daughter had to go to school. So the mom with the other children went to the intake shelter and were not given housing because the full family wasn't there. Now again, this is not based on malice. You know, the Homeless Services have a reason for that intake system. ACS has a reason for its rules. But part of what we're doing at the Children's Cabinet is finding all these different unintentional ways that our policies work at cross purposes so that we can do better by kids. And then finally, the last area I would say is sort of areas like the one I described before. What can we do proactively as a system that can draw on the expertise of the health system and the Human Resource Administration and others to proactively do better by kids? And what we're really focusing on in our earliest stages are the 0 to 3 system. How can the Parks Department, the Health Department, the Police Department, the Fire Department contribute to a better and stronger city for our babies? And so we're thinking that through, and the first thing we're going to talk about is early language. And just to give a quick example, you know, the fire department, you don't think about it as an agency that has much to do with kids. The fire department comes into frequent contact with over 1 million families a year. It's a tremendous opportunity to communicate important information to parents if they thought of their mission that way. And so, again, I'm speaking too long, but those are some of the ideas of what we can do as a city and what the Children's Cabinet is going to be focused on.
That's really fascinating. I wanted to just take an opportunity in case anyone, we'll only have time for 1 or 2 quick questions, but we want to make sure everyone here is getting what they want out of this discussion. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, give it a shot.
Hi, Amy Wollifer from Elmhurst. Can you talk about what percentage of the pre-K slots are half-day versus full-day and how you think that impacts on the overall program?
So right now there are over 51,000 children enrolled in full-day programs, and there are approximately 11,000 children enrolled in half-day programs. And part of what we're trying to understand for the long term is what the natural demand for half-day programs is. We know that we believe fundamentally that children benefit from a full-day pre-kindergarten experience, which we've defined as 6 hours and 20 minutes of instruction. And we think there are not only educational benefits for children, but for most families, real workforce and childcare benefits of having that full day. We know that parents who have access to full-day pre-K are more likely to enter the workforce. They have more economic opportunities as well. But we also know that there may be and probably will be some families who, for whatever idiosyncratic reasons, for whom half-day works. And so part of what we're trying to figure out over the long term is what is that universe. But our real commitment is to, first of all, convince families that their children should be in full-day pre-kindergarten, and then to make sure that we have enough high-quality providers to meet that demand. So I don't know if that answers your question, but okay.
Anyone else? I see
Hi,
someone.
good morning. My name is Ann Ryan. I'm with Read to Succeed in Buffalo, New York. And Deputy Mayor, I so
I
appreciate
can't speak to anybody from Buffalo.
All
right, that's all right.
Hey!
It's too soon. It's too soon.
Anyway.
I'm sorry.
I so appreciated what you said with regard to the cases closed on the efficacy of pre-K, but I do want to kind of have you bridge the gap between what Ms. Russo said with regard to that first and second grade dip and holding accountable and creating a continuum birth to 8 instead of that 0 to 3 system or the preschool system, then education.
So I think, I'll speak briefly, I don't know if you have anything to add, but just very quickly, to be clear, the case is closed on the impact of high-quality pre-kindergarten, but our job is to make sure we're delivering high-quality pre-kindergarten. And just because you have a classroom and a teacher and some children does not mean you have high-quality pre-kindergarten. So what we have done is we've built a system to ensure that we are delivering high-quality pre-kindergarten, which is mostly about our infrastructure for providing support to groups out in the field, but it's also about the evaluation we're doing to understand how that is working and how that is supporting kids. So that's sort of on the first end. The second end is you're absolutely right. Ultimately what we're trying to do is to create a system that gives children in our city a chance to succeed. Mayor de Blasio has spoken very passionately about our desire to go from a city that is two cities to a city that is truly one city rising together. That's why I took the job, that's why I work here. But that's very hard. And building real coordination among very complex systems is very difficult. And so all I can say to you is that is our work every day. I speak to the chancellor just about every day. I speak to Gladys Karen just about every day. I speak to the folks who do this work just about every day. But really, for Sheena's work to be effective, we have to have a system that is designed to partner with the public and private providers who want to make sure that by the time children get to third grade, they're ready to learn. And to do that, we really do need to have a seamless system that supports parents from the time their children are born, frankly, from before their children are born, to the time that our children are acing those third grade tests.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Rachel Payne from Brooklyn Public Library, and I was really intrigued by what specifically firefighters can do. I thought that was really fascinating, and have you brainstormed sort of ideas of how you may encourage the fire department to be involved in early literacy? I think that's wonderful.
Anybody else? Sorry, go ahead. Anybody else have a question?
No, it's fine. Do you have specifics?
Oh.
Well, so I think part of what so it's interesting, the fire department has played a massive role in the pre-kindergarten effort so far. And I'd say in two big areas. One, I can't quite explain to you the complexity of getting 1,700 child care centers licensed and inspected in an extremely short period of time. So the fire department is really at the vanguard of making that work happen effectively. But I would say more broadly that firemen and firewomen are a constant present in communities around the city. They're people who lots of families trust. I mean, they're one of the most trusted institutions in the city. And they spend a lot of their time going out to buildings and businesses and schools and homes to make sure people are safe. So part of what we think about firemen and firewomen are as a distribution system of information. So if you're going to visit a home, could you leave behind information on a tools kit on the importance of reading to children? Could that be part of what you talk about when you go to schools and talk about fire safety? So part of it is having them at the table, and unless they're at the table and being told, part of your job is this, you never really get to the ideas because normally that's not the room they're sitting in. And so I think the first instance is having them sit in the room and being told that part of your mission is to make sure that you're contributing to these efforts around early childhood development. And we're already seeing some interesting ideas. And the most fun part is to see like how jazzed Commissioner Nigro and his team get excited about it. I mean, I'm sure they love fighting fires, but they love this stuff too.
Okay, great. Thank you. Time flies when you're having a great conversation, so thank you.
I'm sorry I dominated that.
No,
Oh, that was
great.
great.